Hey, what's up guys, Clickbait Watch here, and today, as part of my Explained series, I'll be taking it upon myself to try and explain to you guys how the matchmaking rating in Overwatch works. The challenge in this is that we actually don't know a whole lot when it comes to how matchmaking and SR distribution function. Obviously, if the devs were to give us all the details on what creates our MMR, then players would go out of their ways to do things that increase it rather than simply playing the game and improving naturally. However, we have been getting bits and pieces that I will try to put together in today's video. Along with that, we'll talk about some common misconceptions sides of the community. Now without further ado, let's get right into it. So let's open it up with the basics. What exactly is a matchmaking rating? Your matchmaking rating, or MMR for short, is a value that the game assigns to your gameplay performance. Everything you do in the game is being converted into numbers, crunched down and compared to other players with a similar rating. With the way the matchmaker operates, it obviously tries to create matches that are as balanced as possible. In order to do that, it tries to match people with similar skill values. Now this is where we hit the first barrier already, because we don't know exactly what the game takes into consideration. However, it obviously looks closely at your stats. That includes damage done, kills confirmed, and kill participation of any sort, whether through damage or assisting abilities like damage boost or discord orb. If your hero of choice has any sort of healing abilities, it obviously also looks at your healing done and likely separates how much you heal yourself versus your teammates. Next to that, it also tracks how often you die, how much time you spend contesting objectives, and to combine a lot of points into one, how well you're doing your job. That includes damage block for heroes like Reinhardt and D.Va, heroes frozen for Mei, and so on, just to name a few things. Now, one misconception is that the game cannot accurately assign a skill value to certain players because it can't track something like good positioning, which is a vital skill for a good player in general, but also the main focus for a hero like Mercy. However, that is something that the game can quite accurately track through your death count. If you die less, the game assumes that your positioning is good. If you die more often, it assumes that your positioning is bad. The game can also easily spot a player trying to pad their stats. For example, if a lot of damage has been done, but not a lot of kills have been confirmed, and that is not a good mix of statistics. If your death count is very low, but your healing or damage done is also very low, then the game knows that all you did was avoiding fights in order to not tank your stats, and it normalizes accordingly. On the note of gameplay performance, the on fire mechanic is merely a tool that shows you that you're performing well compared to the rest of your current team. It is not an indication for higher SR gains or anything like that. Just felt like I had to throw that out there. Bottom line is that your MMR is far less of a two-dimensional figure as most people think. It isn't as simple as just saying you've done this much damage or healing, you're this rank now. The way your MMR is calculated is actually quite complicated. The game has a massive database of information from players all across the ladder, so it knows what your stats should look like for any division that you're in. It also normalizes for things like poor teammates and bad luck for that matter, but also something like poor map design. The game knows that there are certain parts on certain maps that players have a high tendency of steamrolling through, so it doesn't penalize you harshly for not being able to effectively defend that, just to name an example. The misconception that you get stuck in your rank because of your teammates, even though you belong to a division that's way higher, is completely false because of the way SR distribution behaves in relation to your MMR. For the sake of simplicity, let's assume that the MMR scales from 0 to 5000 just like your SR. On this scale, the game will always try to do one thing: adjust the amount of SR that you get to make sure that you don't venture off too far from your MMR. If you had a 2500 MMR, then ideally the game would want to keep you at a 2500 SR for as long as it takes you to improve your MMR. That means the following: if you deliver a consistent gameplay performance that reflects that of a 2500 rated player, but you've had bad luck with teammates and dropped down to 2100, the game goes, hold on a minute, we don't want you down there, we can't have you shitstorm people who are way worse than you. So it starts giving you more SR for any win and also takes away less for any loss. On the opposite spectrum of that, if a player wins a lot of games in a row due to sheer luck, but their performance is still that of a 2500 rated player, the game obviously does the opposite. It does not want you to reach a rank that is too high for you because it is afraid that you're not going to be able to perform reliably up there. While initially it might sound like the game is rewarding losses and punishing win streaks, you have to think about it that way. If players were constantly rewarded the same amount of SR without them actually improving statistically, then you'll end up having someone that is quite literally boosted, and I don't think anyone wants to have a player with the skill of a platinum playing up in diamond. Simultaneously, we obviously don't want to have a platinum ranked player go down solo know that they just shitstorm on golds and silvers. All of this happens for the sake of balance. It is not about rewarding or punishing the player. It is about delivering as much of a consistent gameplay experience as possible. So the bottom line for this is that it's quite literally impossible to be stuck in a rating that is as low as 2000 if your MMR was set over 3500 master. The game would adjust SR gains so drastically that the player in question gets out of that elo in no time. The notion that people get stuck in their rating is a tricky one to handle. Yes, Overwatch is a team-based game, and yes, players lose games for things that were not their fault all the time in every division all across the ladder. The question is whether or not your own performance is dependent on your team, because it should not be. Yes, whether you win or not is a question directed at the entirety of your team, but how well or bad you're doing, that should to the greatest extent be something that is only affected by you, and that's what the MMR cares about, your performance. Of course, you will be playing a bit better in a good team, and you will be playing a bit worse in a bad team, but if your stats show a difference of night and day in your performance depending on how good or bad the rest of your team is, then that simply means that you're not an individually good player, and that is something you need to provide to reach a higher rating. Now, to debunk another misconception, that of the game holding players accountable for placing the low rating ones. Now, here's the reality of that. This is what the players think that the MMR cares about. And this is what it really cares about. It does not make any sense for the MMR system to care about any more than your most recent history of games. This is why pro players skyrocket through the ratings if they're given a low elo account. It shows how quickly the game adapts to a consistent improvement in gameplay performance. There's one thing that the game, to my knowledge, can't track, and that includes plays that have no metric attached to them, for very obvious reasons. How are you going to calculate something that does not give you any numbers? But if we talk about something like saving your teammates from a Reinhardt ult with a Mei wall, or using a flashbang to stop a teammate from getting pinned, and that's something I don't think the game really gives you credit for in any direct way. However, there was a post made by the principal designer Scott Mercer not too long ago that talks about the following. The faster we can update your matchmaking rating to your real skill, the fewer unfair matches get created with a player with inaccurate skill. Another way to look at it is when we're incorrect at identifying someone's skill, then win or loss streaks can occur. One of the tools we use to accelerate a play to the appropriate MMR is a multiplier to the rating change based upon these consecutive wins or losses. Now, this post is made in relation to a change to the win and losing streaks affecting your skill rating. They went on to say that natural win and losing streaks that were not caused by mismatches would accelerate player gains and losses away from their true skill. That simply means that the SR multiplier had people climb way higher and drop way lower than they wanted them to in relation to their MMR. So now these multipliers are only in place for Smurf accounts, in which case the disparity between their current rank and their real skill is obviously massive. However, this post led me to believe that there's another metric the game considers. It is something that Rainbow Six Siege refers to as uncertainty. In fact, the guys over at Ubisoft published an entire article explaining the way their ladder and MMR systems work, so kudos to that. The long and short is that uncertainty is a value that is being diminished the more games you play. The more games you have on your track record, the more confident the game becomes in being able to determine how good you are. So if a player is new to the game, their uncertainty value will be pretty high. They can easily spend an entire evening playing against anyone from bronze to grandmaster, just so the game has some reference points to their performance relative to the already established player base. But that's obviously something that happens in quick play, since you can't access rank play until level 25. The way this relates to our current discussion is that I believe that Overwatch takes into consideration if you just have a few bad games due to exhaustion or anything else. If you're an active player with a well-established track record, let's say for example you've spent the entirety of your recent history of games in Masters with little to no fluctuation in performance, then the game won't penalize you heavily for playing worse on occasion, because they know you can do better due to your track record. That entire sidetrack and lengthy explanation was really just to highlight the fact that the game does not change your MMR wildly, whether that be for the positive or the negative. It cares less about outstandingly good or terrible performance in a single match, as it cares about how well or not so well you're doing over the course of multiple matches. Apology for derailing here for a bit. I mean, actually, I'm not sorry at all, this is my fucking video, but I think that some additional background info always helps shaping opinions. On the note of which, I think there's another thing that should be interesting to you. Rainbow Six has another important metric in the game that I'm not entirely sure whether or not Overwatch has it incorporated, and that is plain and simply said, a player's ability to win games. Reason for that is that Ubisoft is aware of the different skill sets it requires to be an asset to your team in their game. Next to your aim and reaction time, it also takes into consideration that a player with a low KDR could be a really good shot caller, which ultimately helps them and their teams win more games. Reason I think this might be something that's also present in Overwatch is that that players, including myself, keep encountering others that seem to be really lacking in terms of basic skill sets like aim or positioning. If your ability to win games is something that is also considered when determining your MMR, then I'm not sure whether that is a good thing or not. It would kind of support the notion of players being boosted into ratings where they don't belong, which is obviously a bad thing, but if it's not considered at all, then players who are of very analytic nature with excellent shot calling could be neglected. The problem here is obviously that we're not getting any information from the devs, and it's also not a matter of black and white. People jump the gun way too quickly in assuming that a single metric determines everything. So even if your ability to win was something that the game considers, the question is how severely it impacts your MMR. Does it only have very little effect, or is it more significant? Again, the lack of information is what made writing this video very difficult, but I hope that you still learned a thing or two, and hopefully this got you thinking outside the box yourself. Anyway, fact of the matter states that you alone are responsible for your MMR. You can't win every single match on your own, as this is a team-based game, that's right, but if you really did belong to a rating that is multiple divisions higher than your current one, then odds are that a single victory makes up for up to 3 losses, if not more. On the note of myth busting, supports are not getting any less SR than DPS mains. Again, it largely comes down to your own performance during that game, your MMR versus your current SR, and so on. There are a lot of factors that influence how much SR you get, but that's another topic for another video. Until then, thank you everybody so much for watching as I talk about the hidden matchmaking rating in Overwatch. If you enjoyed the video, do let me know by dropping me a like on your way out, subscribe if you want to see more, and hope to see you all next time.
That was such a fun game.
Fuck you, Genji C9 looking ass. I'm gonna kill that Zen. Nope, you're gonna lose that game is what you're gonna do.